Okay, welcome back to this somewhat chaotic, very interesting, hopefully adequately medicated now podcast. This is the second half, and we're going to try and mellow things out a little bit and bring the mood a little bit back up and ask Ish here, what first brought you to cannabis, just in general?
So like most experienced users or those that have self-medicated for a long period of time, a friend had introduced me to cannabis, and initially I was very hesitant. I'm not that type of person that would recreationally consume drugs. I wasn't even drinking alcohol at the time. So I actually took the time to study about cannabis, and it was my first experience of seeing what the cannabis propaganda was all about. And it wasn't until I started seeing, reading up about cannabis history that it actually made me go, wait, hold on, why is it that, cannabis is illegal in the majority of places? In California, it's legal for medicinal use. So there's definitely some sort of evidence of that. And I went into a bit of a rabbit hole.
Mhm.
But I came out going accepting that it's not as harmful as I'm led to believe, and that's when I started consuming it. After probably the first joint, I I didn't really have much of an experience. It was more like I wasn't high, didn't feel, wrecked or anything like this. A friend of mine was, he had all the effects that you'd expect. But I just the first thing I noticed was that food just tasted great.
Yeah.
The food just tasted great, and I really liked that because I really love food. So whenever my friend had some, I'd be sharing it then. But I started noticing how it helped me with a lot of things like creativity. It helped me with focus. It actually helped. It was a bit. It was opposite. Like I said, like the first time I had it, one of my friends that was with me, it was his first time as well. When he consumed it, he was, um, you know, he was off. He was gone. He was, sedated heavily. He was really high. Whereas me, I was a bit more focused, I had more energy. And that's kind of the experience that I'm getting right now. And that's like the benefit that I get from cannabis.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I almost feel like we should I'm not gonna, but we will be here all day. But I almost feel like we should re-record the first half because we're both, that was my first kind of dose of the day. I mean, I don't know about you, but yeah,
I
it's
got my
a complete
medication for
difference. Yeah,
that. Yeah, I mean,
it's
exactly. Different. It's a different type of vibe as well. Like it definitely, it's definitely misunderstood. A lot of people assume that cannabis is going to be something that knocks you out. It's
Mhm,
going to make you lazy. It's going to make you, you know, it can. It's not like I'm not saying it doesn't, but
mhm.
there are times, depending on the dose, the strain, whatever, it can be a different experience entirely. And
Yeah,
that's what I felt like when I first had it, and I started noticing the benefits that you know, the health benefits that I was getting from consuming cannabis. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, that was my first experience with cannabis anyway.
And I think it's different. It's definitely very difficult to kind of navigate, like you say, trying to understand how that specific that that cannabis in general will affect you. Either because of the different strain or the terpenes or whatever it might be. It's I think, I don't know how much you had support wise, but I think this is something we're like not to try and bring it back down again, but we're kind of lacking unless you're online and you're in communities. That sort of like helping you understand that if you had a negative experience off of cannabis once, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have that negative experiences again and again and again. It just might take a little bit of understanding and support. So having just taken cannabis, recreationally or just having taken it with friends, sort of thing. And I've had that similar experience before. I wasn't completely oblivious to the effects of cannabis before I became a patient. But what took you from having just tried cannabis, finding out that it worked for you, to activism? What led you on from there?
I think I definitely built a connection with cannabis. It sounds weird to say that, but I feel like I've definitely built a strong connection with cannabis, seeing how beneficial it has been to me. But at the same time, I became associated with the culture, and I became associated with the music, the clothing, the language, everything. And cannabis became quite a big part of my life.
Mhm.
And it goes back to me studying about cannabis and looking really deep into it and understanding it more,
Yeah.
and understanding the history, the cultural connection, the really, like, how it's associated with society throughout history and how it's impacted people's lives. It definitely made me feel like I needed to do something to share that information. I felt like a lot of people, when I was speaking to people who were anti-cannabis, a lot of the things that I was saying, it just made me want to laugh, or it made me want to cringe, because it's like, how could you be saying that when it's, I've used it and I know exactly how, it works, and
Yeah.
it's nothing like that. So yeah, I felt inclined to just speak up, but at the same time, it could just be because I have ADHD, and that's just one of the things that people, us neurodivergents do, is just speak up against things
You see something needs correcting, and it just, yeah, just have to correct it.
that, it's, yeah, even if it's, not just like that, but it's more like we're very, like, neurodivergent people are known to be social justice heroes. We're
Mm,
very active in wanting to support people, being empathetic, and that sort of stuff. So that's where I'm at. I'm very empathetic, and I just was passionate about cannabis and wanting to just spread the education. Like, what I've learned about cannabis and what I know about cannabis, I want everyone to know, so that
yeah.
they can be on the same sort of level and understanding as, all of us are, and understand why I'm taking it as a medicine.
I completely agree about that point on empathy, because I mean, do you feel that cannabis not gave, but maybe unlocked some of that like empathy for like others, for just for generally trying to help others, the way it's helped you, sort of thing?
Potentially, and I mean, I'm not going to say this in a factual way, but
Hmm.
like, I mean, look, cannabis has made me the best friends in my life. Like, I created the best relationships with the fruit through cannabis, and it could be that, cannabis gives you that level of empathy that, that you don't get from alcohol. It's a
Hmm.
complete opposite. You get more, like, there's a chance that you get more aggressive. So I can completely agree with that. I feel like cannabis definitely makes people more empathetic, and
Yeah.
that's why, you can create the best of friends just through smoking a joint with a stranger.
Yeah. But
I'm not gonna say condone smoking a joint. Please
no, but
try. Please don't have it.
I get what you're saying. Just being around others that are also equally medicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I it's just, I see what you're saying. It's just, I felt like after having found cannabis, it just felt unjust that it was so misunderstood, or it was so taboo, or it was so um it was an enigma. It was just, it's not widely spoken about the legality of it. And it, for me, it just felt unjust. And I talked about this earlier in the behind the scenes bit, that I could have friends that would need this medication, and they couldn't have access to it, or they didn't know about it, or oh, actually, to be honest, to bring it on a bit more of on a point, I saw a video that Patience Can released recently, where they, I think Sal was visiting a disability festival, And one of my favorite parts was where this elderly lady, he brought over this leaflet, and he was just like, yeah, I'm talking about medical cannabis today, talking about that, you can get it. It's been available, November 2018. And they kind of like, okay, what's that? All right, all right. And then he walks away, and then 2 seconds later, like this lady comes chasing him down, and he's just like, no, so such and such wants to speak to you about this. And I'm just like, it's that, like you say, it's that empathy to want to get out there and make sure that it's known, but it's also that feeling you get back when you see that person who otherwise may have been taking these potentially harmful medications for years may now get some relief because of the fact that you just handed them a leaflet. So that's, for me at least, why I think activism is important. So yeah, is that what you would say is sort of similar? Or
I mean, the reactions that we get from the general public when we just say, cannabis is legal, or it's an alternative to the pharmaceutical medicines. The light that just shines from people's faces. I've had people just hug me and say, oh, you've just saved me, all of these sorts of things. And it's so nice, honestly.
yeah.
This is why when I got my prescription, and the reason why we're doing this roadshow campaign and doing our activism, is when I first got my prescription, I just wanted to run around the streets telling everyone.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go around telling them, like, cannabis is legal, and
Yeah.
now I've got an opportunity to do it. This is like my excuse, I guess. But the reception and like that we've got from people, and the kind of reactions that we've got from people has been, it's inspiring. It really is. It's just,
Yeah.
it's inspiring, honestly.
It's just important to me to know that, like, just a little bit of, a conversation with your nan, or like a conversation with that person at the bus station, or your doctor, or whoever, just that alone can be activism. That alone can be a form of just getting the message out there. And you could ultimately, like somebody did when they told me, change their life,
Exactly. The main thing is just planting the seed. Planting the
Yeah.
seed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. So, I mean, it may or may not be a terrible segue again, but I want to talk about a topic that I think you've talked about publicly before, and may relate to this conversation surrounding the stigma of cannabis. It's the historical context, or perhaps cultural elements of cannabis. What of those do you feel are being perhaps ignored or forgotten, or or just left out within the public sphere, or the community, or this sector?
So I think we all kind of understand, or we all know, that cannabis has been around for thousands of years, dating back to traditional Chinese medicine, spiritual rituals, and it's traversed through the whole globe for various reasons in that kind of space, whether it's for medicine, traditional reasons, spiritual practices, even social practices as well. But the history of cannabis is just fantastic. It's amazing. It tells us a lot about the plant and our relationship as humans with the plant as well. But one of the things that really resonates with me about cannabis history is that, and I think there's a bit, and it can relate to the way cannabis is legalized, medical cannabis is legalized in the UK, is that there was a Muslim physician who prescribed the Caliph's son, at the time the Caliph's son, cannabis to treat their epileptic seizures. So that's one of the first recorded history of cannabis being used for that purpose. And it definitely relates to the way, the reason why we legalized in the first place here. And it also adds to the changes that we're seeing in society as well, where now if you ask a Muslim about cannabis, it's completely forbidden. It's a no-no, it's haram, as they say. But there are a small sect which acknowledge the history and acknowledge the context of cannabis as a medicine, and say that it's acceptable for those to be prescribed under the supervision of a doctor.
Mhm.
And again, this is the same sort of it's kind of the same narrative with various other cultures and religions as well, where, say for example, in India, they've used it for various different festivals and spiritual rituals and things like that. For example, even to this day, in India, they will consume a drink which consists of milk or yogurt and cannabis, which is called bhang, and they'll drink that during the festival of Holi. And it's supposed to be, they consider that cannabis as a very important plant because it's something that relates to one of their gods, Shiva, and usually Shiva is depicted with a cannabis plant, and it's apparently supposed to bring them closer to enlightenment. But if you were to speak to a person in India and in the UK, for example, and ask them if they'd be interested in consuming cannabis or a cannabis infused drink, they might be a bit hesitant and be like, nah, I'm okay. I don't want to, this sort of thing. Because, we've got the laws in this country are a bit different. But if you go to India as well and talk about cannabis, most people say, cannabis is restricted. It's, it's against the, it's against the law and everything. But it's still part of their culture. It's still part of their history.
I find it very, not to interrupt, sorry to interrupt, but just to on this topic, in even in the UK, I find it very strange that like a lot of our history is just kind of missed out. I was reading Professor David Nutt's book, who is a professor in the UK, who specializes in like botanical medicines like psychedelics and drugs and such, and he was talking about how even the physician for Queen Victoria used cannabis, and Queen Victoria sent letters, I think, describing the benefits of cannabis. So it's possible that she was also using it herself as a perhaps a tincture. And Henry VIII, I think, famously commanded or made a law that all farmers are to, with 60 acres or above of land, are to start cultivating hemp.
Yeah,
that's sorry,
true.
and please carry on. Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit of that. It just feels odd that even in this country that is the case.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to go to as well. Like in this country, cannabis is not new now that it's legal recently. It's been, like you said, it was by law, Henry VIII required people with land to cultivate hemp.
Mm-hmm.
And Queen Victoria, not only did she take cannabis, but when someone offered her cannabis and tobacco, she said she didn't want the tobacco and she'd prefer to have the cannabis instead.
Makes it pure.
Exactly. So there's a good history of cannabis in various different communities and cultures, especially within the UK. And then it goes also to the diversity of the UK as well, where now we've got people from various different backgrounds populating the UK, and it's had an influence on the war on drugs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that they're the reason why, it's like this. It's the fact that unfortunately they've become the victims of the war on drugs with heavy racialized legislation and policies that just criminalized them and created a shift away from their cultural and religious heritage, that's associated with cannabis, and kind of pushed them away from that and created a different kind of like environment for them being in the UK. So, for example, the Rastafarians, they consider cannabis as similar to the Hindus. They consider cannabis as something that's very sacred, and it's consumed to get them closer to God and bring them enlightenment. So very similar to the Hindu rituals, because throughout history, because of the slave trade, the Hindus moved into the Caribbean and brought cannabis over to them, and it became a part of their culture.
I remember
And
my dad, who is a religious leader, will say he got quite offended when I showed him some pictures from the cannabis museum in Amsterdam that showed, like potentially that the cannabis may have been used in like holy oils and anointment. That was in the anointment oil or something like that in the Bible. Yeah, potentially I'll say, but yeah, it's very interesting that religions, including ones that are more popular in the West, I'll say, that are very much ignoring their own history with that plant.
that's true, but at the same time, now we're seeing more of the Western culture accepting cannabis, and we're even seeing that with the Christian and the Jewish communities in the Western cultures, right? It's in the Western countries, they're starting to accept cannabis, and they're starting to relate cannabis to some of the contexts of religious language. I can't remember, but there was this one word within the Jewish Hebrew Bible. I think it was called cannabosim,
Mm.
and they believe that that's a word that's associated to cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Christians, like you said, the anointment oil, they believe that one of the ingredients was cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard Catholics who have, been in monasteries where the nuns have been using cannabis and just, like lighting it up, and the fumes are it's basically hotboxing the whole area, the whole place, the room that they're in. So it's been there in the past. There's a chance that it has that kind of relationship in the past, and that it's been pushed out due to propaganda. But we're starting to see that people are coming back to it again and accepting it more, especially in the context of as a medicine. But I think with more conservative cultures, more conservative communities, so non-Western communities, they're a little bit more restrictive, and it goes back to it goes to that war on drugs, but at the same time it goes to their traditional values and their need to do as good as they can or be the best citizen they can, so they're not ostracized by their society, or they're not
Yeah.
way because of the color of their skin or the religion that they follow. So
The way I always looked at it, again, I'm sorry to, it's only from my own experience. It's just that, from the religion that I know, is that the way I'd question it is, I think it says in the Bible something like, obey the law of the land unless that law is unjust or something. I may be completely misquoting this, and I'll get in trouble for it later. But I just see this as being completely unjust. Is a plant that, I'm not trying to get too spiritual here, but it's been a quote unquote miracle for me. It's saved my life, and it's difficult to see that can't be recognized as being completely unjust, even in religious communities. And of course, like you say, perhaps I'm not as involved in other communities, so I wouldn't know. But like you say, are you saying that it's starting to turn around?
it definitely is. Within the Western communities and Western countries, it's definitely turning around, but it's also starting to turn around in the Eastern countries too. We've seen Thailand, changing, and only the other day, I believe Pakistan had brought in a new bill to start regulating medical cannabis and start providing it to their people. So that we're starting to see it develop across the entire globe, but I feel like the
Yeah.
West had made that initial step forward, but I feel like the West made the initial step to shut down
Backwards.
cannabis in
Yeah.
the first place.
Yeah. They took us backwards. Yeah.
So you could conspire, you could like have a conspiracy and say, and to be honest with you, I personally feel as though cannabis was shut down due to financial interests in other industries like gas, oil, and steel, and other things like that.
Mm.
And now we can see that, the world is changing due to climate change, and you know, people who want to move away from destructive materials or things like gas and oil, trying to stay away from that. So what else can they replace it with? Oh, we might as well go back to using cannabis that we were using for tens of thousands of years. So who are going to make the first step? The people who shut it down in the first place. That's just me inspiring in my head.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. It's unfortunate that, like, after, what was it, it was the 1970s? It wasn't even that long ago when it was criminalized.
It actually started in the 1930s.
But I mean, when the US fully
the US
criminalized.
the US started their propaganda and
Yeah.
war on drugs in the in the late 1960s.
Yeah.
And the early 1970s, but the UK actually started theirs in the 1930s,
Okay.
late 1930s.
Because this is the thing, I don't think it's widely talked about, specifically regarding our own history with the legality of cannabis. I mean, I've got a book back here that I love looking at that shows exactly what you're talking about. The US is, I think, from what I can see, it seems like a lot of using it for racial bias, and using it in sort of combination with like Jim Crow laws and stuff like that to try and increase the divide between even the Mexican people in the South who are using cannabis, and then they lump that into to also to African American people, Black people, and so that's something that doesn't seem too much touched on in these books. I can see some very interesting subjects on, like, the Beatles having their own, and Paul McCartney getting pulled up on it, and apparently they themselves were high on cannabis while being what was it, knighted or whatever, given awards by the Queen. But we don't see too much of the history talked about. So do you know a bit more about the history in this country that relates to cannabis prohibition?
Not that much, but it's more associated with the Rastafarian communities that came along during the windfall.
Yes.
So that created, like, them coming into the building community in the UK, the Rastafarians coming into the UK, allowed for these sorts of restrictions, or what should I say, the kind of prejudice that we still see to this day, in like that are coming from the war on drugs. And like I've mentioned before, for Rastafarians, cannabis is still a big part of it's a big part of their culture and their religion. So they've had to shift the way that they practice their religion, or what they do. Do they carry on with this? Do they carry on with their rituals, or do they just face the criminal charges? So I feel like when it comes to trying to relate it to what happened in the US with the Mexicans and the Black community, we can see a similar sort of thing with the Rastafarian community in the UK, and also the Indian community, a small minority of the Indian community that have also had that also have the same religious relationship with cannabis as the Rastafarians. So we saw, and even to this day, we still see, high rates of the Black community being stopped and searched. I think there was a recent study published by Release, mentioning that the Black population are more likely to be stopped and searched than their white counterparts. A similar sort of comment that came directly from the government, I believe, as well, the Justice Department, and it's not great. And I think it goes back to that kind of, like, I don't want to start. Yeah, again, I don't want to start talking about like some kind of conspiracy and say, oh, they're doing this to control the communities and to, to have, something to create some sort of divide and all these sort of stuff. And it is the case in some places. It is a political movement. It's a political agenda where, these restrictions are put in place and, certain individuals are being targeted over other certain individuals. It's very blatant in London. Like London is such a, I wouldn't say it's small, but it is small space that you can see the divide and the war on drugs happening like right in your face. You can go to
Yeah.
like
Well, it's a much more dense population with a much, higher like level of like, I'd say, what, diversity. So yeah.
but I mean, say for example, you go to South London or even North
Mhm.
London, anywhere on the outskirts of London, right? The outside parts of London, you will see a lot of like the black communities or even the communities of color being targeted a lot more for their use of cannabis or being stopped and searched and things like this. But if you go into the center, right into the center where it's a bit more, you know, affluential,
Mhm.
you will smell cannabis, see cannabis, but you won't see anyone having any issues. You'll probably go to a park and there's a group of people smoking cannabis and it's completely fine.
Mhm.
And you won't see the police attention as much as you would if you was in the other sides, in the other
Mhm.
parts. So it's
I feel like I heard that there was going to be a city cornered introduce, say, like a bit of a, not a decriminalization, but a bit of a zone in which, certain areas it would be, you'd be referred to support rather than, cautioned or anything, or prosecuted or such. What do you know? I'm not asking if, I don't suspect you're an expert on it, but do you know what's happened with that? I mean, it does, like you said, that wouldn't be introduced unless there was an issue.
I think it was introduced in London, wasn't it? Where
Yeah.
you'd get I think it might have been nationwide as well, but I've not seen it in my area that I live in. But initially, it is just more attention towards the rather than making it a crime, more trying to focus towards seeing it as a health issue as well,
Yeah.
social issue. But it just still doesn't work out. It's not decriminalized entirely, and you'd still get like a fine, and you'd have to do like it's like for example speeding.
Hmm.
Or speeding, you can choose to pay the fine or you go to the courses, but instead you don't have that option with cannabis.
Yeah.
Actually, I think you get like three strikes. I'm just assuming here. I'm not 100% sure, but I think after like three strikes, you have to do like the course rehabilitation, things like that. Um, so that's happening in London, but across the UK, there's various areas where the police forces have completely refused or don't wish to prosecute people for cannabis possession and in some cases cultivation of cannabis as well,
Mhm.
as long as it's not, as long as it's used for self, yourself, and it's not for commercial purposes or for selling things like that.
So do you feel as if, I think I've heard you speak about this before, but do you feel as if the current, as you've laid out, historical, aspects that are being ignored here, do you think that has had any sort of play on the industry, the pharmaceutical sort of industry relating to medical cannabis? Do you think that's had any sort of like effect on it? With that sort of like ignorance potentially not on this particular subject being potentially present in that sector?
I think I think it's been ignored.
Okay.
I mean, I say that, and there's like a recent post done by one of the clinics about the association with certain religions and things like that. So it's not. I mean, history is history; it's always going to be there. But associating it with present time and the current landscape, I would still say there's a long way to go. But at the same time, Um, we even the industry's still got quite a bit to grow anyway before we can actually start saying, yeah, we need more people of color in the space. We need more people of color leading it. But I will say this though, I feel like there is a need for industry representatives or certain organizations within the industry to actually consider introducing, more diverse, hiring procedures or policies, so that we're seeing more people who have been affected by the war on drugs
Yeah,
being on the right side of, the law,
being represented.
being represented, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So I think there's a need for more like diversity in hiring in that side of things, just so that again, yeah, there's some sort of recognition as to the
yeah.
things that
Because some of this comes into personal experience, doesn't it? It's maybe you're ignorant to it because you've never experienced some of these things, or you've not, you wouldn't have to come face to face with some of these historical and cultural things that are still at play. So I think, like you say, it's just about having that extra voice and that extra representation that can bring that experience and that knowledge into play.
definitely can. It makes it a lot easier as well when you need to speak to family or just a community as a whole, and you've got representation. You've got a doctor who's a Muslim, or you've got a doctor who's a Christian or a Jew, or who are known for having traditional values and known for sharing those traditional values, and them having the representation in the space makes it easier for patients to feel confident about speaking about the medicine, about trying the treatment in the first place, taking that first step to go, what, this could be the treatment that works for me, let me go for it. Rather than saying, oh, I don't want to do this because my family is just going to say no. What my family going to say? They're going to say, oh, it's completely illegal. How, like, what kind of patient do if they're in a position where the medicine that could benefit them, be the one medicine that could really improve the quality of their life, but if they take that medicine, their family's going to shun them, kick them out, kick them away from the community. Um, you know, what does that individual do, and how does that individual approach it? And I've had that issue. Like, my
Mm.
family are very conservative and they're anti-cannabis, and it's taken a while for them to now understand, okay, this is a medicine that he's using, although they're still a bit hesitant because of the cultural and stigma that's associated with it.
Yeah,
I could share, like, um, a religious scholar who's, very well respected in the community. I could share a video of him saying, medical cannabis is completely fine as long as it's under the supervision of a doctor. That can really impact the opinion that, a
yeah,
Muslim parent would have. So it's the same with any other culture and community. If there's someone from a respected, um, you know, community, a respected, like someone who's really respected, who has, strong traditional values, and you know, they can represent the cannabis community. That's what we need.
yeah. I mean, I'm inclined to agree. I think it's. I think this is certainly an issue, and it's probably one that doesn't get talked about enough. I think that it's representative across all sort of, whether it's race, religion, or ethnicity, or whatever, or gender, or if it's perhaps your condition. I think that oftentimes in this sector, at least from what I've seen, it's a lot of people that don't have any experience are making the decisions, are making all these, or in these positions, and it's not enough of a diverse sort of hiring field that it's allowed for all those different perspectives to be at play.
Yeah, yeah, that's 100% right. I agree with that. Because I mean, even for like myself, when it comes to I mean, I don't know how to say this without trying to be rude or like completely, trying to attack anyone. But for someone like me who's running this organization, Patients Can UK, I really don't feel like my community of people, like my ethnicity, the ethnicity of various other volunteers in my community are represented or respected in that kind of way where our voices should be heard, and we should be put in a place where we can represent other patients too and help them. I don't want to say, the industry is racist. I don't want to call it whitewashed and things like this, but I just feel like certain things, there's certain directions to certain things based on ethnicity, and I can see it quite clearly as running the organization that I am and doing the work that I'm doing.
Well, that's why it's important to have these conversations. And I'm not trying to cut you off here. I just think that this is the sort of perspective that I perhaps wouldn't have. So I think it's important that you have a voice out there to voice those sort of concerns if you see something. You're saying it. Sorry, not to quote the train station announcer, but what I'm trying to say. It's if you are involved and you are seeing something firsthand, then it's important that you have a voice to get it out there. So I appreciate you doing that today. I think if you're okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. And I do very much appreciate Ish or Mohammed Wasway from Patients Can coming on today and sharing your perspective, your opinions, being completely frank with us. And yeah, I appreciate your time here today. Is there anything you want to say before we finish off? Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kieran.
Is there anything you want to share as well? Sorry, I should have said.
No, I appreciate that. Again, thank you, Kieran, for having me on. I appreciate that. But what I do want to share is that we're a very active organization. We're always trying our best to take on more volunteers, but we have events going on throughout the year, trying to raise awareness. So volunteers, we need the volunteers to help out as much as we can. But if you can attend some of our events, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, the roadshow. Yeah, absolutely, and the go-karting. I'll pop links everywhere down below so you can go find out what
for that as well. So make sure you
find out what that's all about. There was a petting zoo or something you did recently that I missed out on. I was really jealous of.
Was that the donkey sanctuary?
Oh man, I love donkeys. I'm missing out. But I hope everybody enjoyed today's episode of the Patient Podcast, and we will see you again here on episode 4. Remember to love yourselves. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.